Dramatic and mysterious opening, English version. Soft thunder rumbles in the distance. There are stories in the Bible that shine with divine glory. Tales of faith, of miracles, of hope that pierces through darkness. But hidden between those radiant verses lies another side, a side few dare to whisper about, a side where holy men fall, where entire cities burn for their sins, where the boundaries between devotion and desire collapse into ash. These are not stories of saints, but of sinners, of people who looked upon the face of God and chose to turn away. For centuries, these tales were told in hushed voices, warnings carved into sacred texts, lessons drenched in blood and fire. They speak of lust, of pride, of betrayal, and the terrible price that comes when a human heart believes it can outweat the divine. Imagine standing in the streets of Sodom, where laughter echoes through the night, not from joy but from indulgence, where the moon watches as men and women abandon all shame, and the sky itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for judgment to fall. These stories aren't just about the past. They are mirrors, dark reflections of who we are today, because every sin that once doomed a city still whispers inside us. Every forbidden desire, every secret thought, still waits in the quiet corners of the human soul. So tonight, as we journey through forbidden pages of Scripture, listen closely, not with fear, but with understanding, because behind every punishment lies a reason. Behind every ruin lies a choice. And it all begins with one city, a place once blessed, then burned from the earth. Sodom, the dark chronicles of the Bible, the fall of Sodom and beyond. Sound of wind rising, faint echoes of distant fire. Sodom, a city once radiant under the desert sun, its gardens green, its walls shimmering with wealth and laughter. To travelers, it was a place of comfort. To its people, it was paradise. But the closer you walked to its heart, the more you could feel something rotting beneath the beauty. At night, the streets came alive with whispers and shadows. Desire ruled, not love. Greed thrived, not generosity. And somewhere in the unseen corners, the prayers of the righteous faded beneath the noise of sin. The Scripture says that the cry of this city reached heaven, a cry so loud, so filled with corruption, that even angels could not ignore it. 2 messengers were sent, divine beings in human form, to witness with their own eyes what men had become. They arrived quietly, as strangers at dusk. Dust covered their robes. Their faces glowed faintly beneath the fading light. They sought refuge in the house of one man, Lot, a righteous soul who still trembled before God. He welcomed them in, offered bread and safety. But outside, the streets began to stir. Whispers turned to laughter. Laughter turned to shouts. And soon, the men of the city, old and young, surrounded Lot's home, demanding the strangers be brought out. They didn't come for conversation. They came for lust. Lot begged them to stop, to remember mercy, to remember what was sacred. But they mocked him, jeering that he was no judge over them. That night, the city revealed its true face, unashamed, unrepentant, unholy. And then the heavens opened. Lightning tore through the clouds. A blinding fire fell from above, not like any storm known to man. Flames rained down like justice itself, devouring stone, soil, and flesh alike. Sodom screamed. Gomorrah followed. And in moments, the paradise of men became the graveyard of their own sin. Only Lot and his daughters escaped, their hearts pounding as they fled into the mountains. Behind them, the sky burned crimson. But even then, one turned back. Lot's wife, drawn by memory, by sorrow, by the inability to let go of what once was. In that instant, she became still, a pillar of salt, frozen between obedience and desire. Some say her soul still watches the ruins, a monument to the cost of looking back. When God commands you to move forward, soft pause, sound fades to distant wind. But the story doesn't end with fire, because even in the ashes of judgment, human weakness endures. Lot and his daughters took shelter in a cave, high above the wasteland that once was their home. Days turned to weeks. Silence became their companion, and fear that the world outside was gone forever crept into their hearts. One night, Under the trembling glow of torchlight, the daughters whispered a plan born not of wickedness, but of desperation. They feared their father was the last man alive, and so they made him drink wine and did what had never been done. From that moment came two children, Moab and Ammon, fathers of nations that would one day rise against Israel. Even in trying to preserve life, sin had sown seeds of conflict that would last for generations. And this is the echo of human frailty. Even after destruction, mankind finds ways to fall again. Sound shift, faint chanting, a darker tone. Far to the north, another city would one day repeat Sodom's sins. Gibeah, a city of the chosen people, yet corrupted by the same darkness. A traveler came seeking rest, a man of the tribe of Levi with his companion, a woman weary from the road. They found shelter in a home as Lot once did. But soon, as if cursed by memory, the men of that place surrounded the house, demanding that the stranger be given to them. And again, a woman was sacrificed to save a man. All through the night, she suffered. By dawn, she was silent. The next morning, her lifeless body lay at the door, her hand reaching for the threshold she would never cross again. The man took her body, divided it, and sent it across the 12 tribes of Israel, a message that screamed louder than words. Look what we have become. And from that act, a war began, brother against brother, tribe against tribe, until the land was soaked not just with the blood of sinners, but with the blood of those who swore to destroy sin. Softer tone, reflective, mournful. Generations passed, yet the pattern remained. Men chosen by God fell to the same whispers that destroyed Sodom. The sons of Eli, priests of the Most High, stole from the offerings meant for heaven. They defiled the sanctuary with acts of lust. They treated the altar as their playground. And when their father refused to correct them, the Lord himself became their judge. Both sons fell in battle the same day. And with their deaths, the light of their house was extinguished forever. From the flames of cities to the fall of priests, the message was always the same. No one is beyond the reach of judgment. Then came the people of Israel in the wilderness, a people blessed with freedom, yet chained by desire. They met the women of Moab, and temptation came not with violence, but with a smile. The feasts of Baal were filled with music and wine, and before long, the chosen of God knelt before false idols. The same hands that once lifted prayers now raised cups to other gods. And once again, the plague of consequence swept through the camp, until one man, Phinehas, rose in righteous anger, ending the cycle with his own hand. It was brutal. It was justice. And the camp fell silent once more. But perhaps the most painful fall was not that of a nation, but of a family. In the house of King David, the man after God's own heart, sin crept in quietly, not through battle, but through blood. Amnon, David's firstborn, looked upon his sister Tamar and desired her. He deceived her, violated her, and cast her aside. And when David heard, he was furious, but he did nothing. Silence, once again, became the accomplice of sin. Tamar's brother, Absalom, burned with hatred. He waited, and when the time came, he killed Amnon, and the kingdom was torn apart from within. Even a house chosen by God was not spared from the consequences of unchecked desire. And so, as the pages of Scripture unfold, we see the same story told again and again. Cities fall, kings weep, priests die, not because God abandoned them, but because they abandoned the truth within themselves. Every act of judgment in the Bible is not just punishment. It is reflection. It shows us who we are when we forget the divine order, when we let pride, lust, or fear guide our choices, when we look back, like Lot's wife, longing for the very sin that destroyed us. So our final note, echo fades into silence. The fire of Sodom may have turned to dust, but the lessons it left behind still burn, in our stories, in our conscience, and in the quiet reminder that no matter how bright we shine, we are always one choice away from the darkness. Conclusion, the light beyond the fire. And so as the dust of Sodom settles, as the cries of Gibeah fade, as the smoke of lost kingdoms drifts into the horizon, one truth remains, that through every fall, every act of rebellion, every spark of human sin, God never stopped watching. He judged, yes, but he also waited for hearts to remember. because the Bible was never written only to frighten us. It was written to wake us, to remind us that sin is not merely a crime against heaven, but a shadow cast by our own choices. Look closely and you'll see a pattern. Every story of ruin begins the same way, with someone believing that they know better than God, a city that no longer fears him, a priest who forgets his vows, a king who believes his throne makes him untouchable, and then the fall. But in every fall, there's a whisper, a promise buried beneath the ashes, soft reflective tone. When the flood came, God left an ark. When Sodom burned, he led Lot to safety. When Israel wandered, he still sent prophets to guide them. And when mankind could no longer find its way, he sent his son. The message was always mercy, even when delivered through fire, because without fire, gold cannot be refined. Without darkness, light cannot be known. We often read these stories and shudder at their horror. But what if, in every act of judgment, there was love? A fierce, unrelenting love that refuses to let us destroy ourselves. Wind sound fades in gently, almost like a sigh. The people of Sodom believed pleasure was freedom. The daughters of Lot believed survival justified sin. The priests of Eli believed power meant blessing. And King David's family believed bloodlines could not break. But none of them escaped the same truth, that no soul can stand in the light of God while clinging to darkness. And yet, through every collapse, God's grace was already waiting at the edge of the ruins, waiting for someone to look up, waiting for someone to say, "Forgive me," because forgiveness is the one miracle that costs nothing and yet changes everything. Music grows slightly, a mix of awe and melancholy. Imagine, for a moment, if the people of Sodom had listened, if the men of Gibeah had turned away, if Eli had corrected his sons, if David had spoken before Absalom's hatred took root. The Bible might have been shorter, but perhaps the lessons would be forgotten, because sometimes the darkness teaches us to value the light. Every broken city, every fallen man, every silent prayer, they are all part of a greater story, a story not of wrath, but of redemption. The same God who rained fire also painted rainbows. The same God who struck down the proud also raised up the humble. And the same God who watched the world fall walked among us to help us rise again. Long pause, then a gentle whisper. So when you hear these ancient tales, don't see only the punishment. See the warning and the mercy behind it. Because somewhere inside each of us, there's a city like Sodom, a heart like Lot's wife, a soul like Amnon, a pride like Eli's sons. But there's also, always, the chance to be different, to choose obedience over impulse, to choose light over shadow, to choose to stop looking back. Final musical swell, soft, hopeful tone. And maybe that's the greatest message of all, that no matter how far humanity falls, no matter how fierce the fire, no matter how deep the sin, God's story does not end in ashes. It ends with grace, with forgiveness, with the chance to begin again. So tonight, as you close your eyes and the echoes of these stories fade, remember this: the fire of judgment may burn bright, but the mercy of God burns brighter still.